disrupt yourself? How will you disrupt yourself? How will you disrupt yourself? On today's show,
what I found when I talked to literally 6 Traeger owners, randomly selected, went up to Oregon to talk to people, 6 out of 6 said it's the best product they've ever owned.
welcome to the Disrupt Yourself podcast, a podcast where we discuss strategies and advice for how to climb the S-curve of learning in your professional and personal life, disrupting who you are to slingshot into who you want to be. I'm your host, Whitney Johnson, and today our guest is Jeremy Andrus, a man who consistently plays where others aren't, a disruptor. First as the CEO of Skullcandy, where he helped grow sales from $1 million to $300 million. And now as the CEO of Traeger Grills, a product that people don't like, they love. People like the Currys, as in Steph and Aisha, Joe Rogan, and Dan Patrick. Jeremy is the husband of Kristen and the father of 6 children, ages 3 to 12. Jeremy, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Delighted to have you. First question for you is, where did you grow up and what did you want to be when you grew up?
Boy, where did I grow up? All over the world. So moved around quite a bit. My father was in brand marketing, and my earliest memories are in the Midwest, Minnesota. 10 years old, we picked up and moved to the Midlands of England. So we lived in a tiny town called Cropston that you've never heard of. Our house didn't have an address; it had a name. It was just at the intersection of a road, and it was probably the first major change that I'd gone through in my life. Then I developed a thick British accent, moved back to Boston, and people made fun of my British accent. So I'm like this high-pitched British accent living in Boston. And if you'd asked me, where am I from? The answer would have been, I don't know. It's like, we're just trekking around. I still say I'm from the East Coast.
Okay, so you grew up in lots of different places. What did you want to be when you were that 10-year-old with the British accent?
I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and CEO. I don't ever remember a moment of wanting something else. And I'm not sure why I wanted that, partly because my dad was a businessman, and I was always fascinated by the ability to go out and build something or sell something. I remember my first business, I bought a lawnmower. I bought it from the neighbor. It was in kind. I agreed to cut his lawn for 3 years, and he gave me this riding tractor lawnmower.
And riding lawnmower.
It was a riding lawnmower, which I only flipped once on a steep backyard. And I was always writing little business plans. I didn't call them business plans, but I was thinking about, how do I build the next? I was always selling stuff door to door. I was finding like these little sort of trinkets that felt innovative, little, innovations that hadn't found the market. Once it was these gas caps that you didn't have to put the gas cap back on your car, so you could put gas into it without taking the gas cap off and putting it back on. My dad and I bought 100 of them. They were really hard to sell. I mean, like I went door to door for days and probably sold 2 of them. I never thought I wanted to go work for a big corporation. It's easy looking back, and I now identify with what my desire was, even though I didn't know how to articulate it. But I always wanted to build stuff, sell stuff, build stuff, do something that was, I was never a guy that wanted a job. I had a couple of jobs growing up. One summer, it was before I was old enough to get a job. I was probably 13 years old, and I picked fruit and vegetables in a farm for a summer, like strawberries on my knees for 8 hours a day. And I always get home and say, boy, I worked so hard. And he gave me $24, and that was nice to have, but it didn't feel like a great trade. And so I was never someone that thought about, how do I get a job and work more hours and save for the next 50 years? Because when I built little businesses, when I cut lawns and I can make $50 an hour cutting a lawn, as opposed to, waiting tables and making 8 to 10, it just never registered to me that was an interesting career path. I wanted to build stuff where I felt like I controlled the outcome.
So you said your dad was in brand marketing. Where do you think this entrepreneurial build figure out how to do this came from? Or is it just more your DNA? Do your parents look at you and go, Jeremy, where did you come from? Or you're a chip off the old block?
You know what? My dad and I were actually very different.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entrepreneurial side of my dad as well. He and I worked together in some of these things. And I remember when I was really young, he started a scone business at the Minnesota State Fair. And he was trying to see if there was a business to be built. And I remember seeing him do this. Now I look back and realize my dad had graduated from college and graduated from Kellogg, from business school, worked at General Mills, and he's like making dough and setting up this stand and selling stuff. And it wasn't to make a few extra bucks. I think he wanted to see if there was a business to be built. And so there's definitely some common DNA. I think part of the difference is that the world has changed a lot since he had started his career. He got married young, had kids young, and there wasn't as much entrepreneurship. And
that was an odd thing.
It was an odd thing.
People weren't entrepreneurs.
They weren't. And I can't imagine, there was never a moment where I said, maybe I want to go work for General Mills and like work my way up the ladder for 40 years and, very predictable. So I did have some jobs. And again, some of these things I understand better looking back. I had some jobs and they didn't really go very well. And I sort of wondered, maybe I'm not going to be successful like I thought. And I now look back and say, I have a very strong DNA. I have found exactly what I want to do every day. And there's a lot of sort of maneuvering to figure that out, but there's some DNA, and I do, I have 4 siblings and we all do very different things.
Okay, so you landed at Skullcandy about 15 years ago now?
Yep. March 16th of 2004 was my first day. That's a Monday.
Okay, so almost exactly 15 years.
Uh-huh.
So tell us how you landed there, but don't give us the super linear version.
Okay. So first of all, I had been dissatisfied in my career for a long time. I was a management consultant for technically 3 years, but I got a year into it and said, this stinks. Like, I'm not good at this. I don't like this. And then I started kind of doing different things. I started working on some real estate stuff on the side. I day traded stocks. And so I was not a very good management consultant. And I loved Monitor. I loved the people. But I remember a single moment in 3 years where I was sitting across from a client after working so hard and feeling this rush of adrenaline that I'd done good work and I was enjoying it. Once in 3 years that's a hard, over a 30-year career, I get to feel that not very many times. And I appreciate what I learned from it, but I bounced around a lot. For 6 months, I day traded stocks and unbelievable experience, like incredible adrenaline rush, very stressful. I turned $25,000 into $2 million. And then I lost all of it. Plus I had to borrow $200,000 to pay back my margin losses. So like this unbelievable ride. It was a terrible experience, but I learned a lot from it. And I've got all of these sort of seemingly random experiences, all of which gave me some additional insight into what I wanted to, it wasn't what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, and like where I would find the greatest satisfaction. But it took me a long time to get there. Like I mostly.
So it sounds like about 10 years.
Yeah, it's about 10 years. Yeah, it felt like a lot longer than that, but that's about right.
Well, but at that point in your life, as a percentage.
It was a lot. Yeah, you're right.
You just said something about the day trading. I mean, talk about a roller coaster, right? $25,000, $2 million, borrowing $200,000. You said you learned a lot. What is one thing that you learned that you now apply today as a CEO of Traeger Grills?
I want to create value. Like I want to build something where, because of my ingenuity and hard work and thoughtfulness, willingness to take risks, I can actually build something that has value. And when you're day trading stocks, I was in the middle of 20, 30 trades a day. I didn't control the outcome. I wasn't adding value to anything or anyone. And all I was doing was making money. And that was kind of fun for a while because it just felt really easy to make money. Now, when you're day trading stocks in like 96, 97 with a lot of margin and you're buying internet stocks, it turns out that anyone can feel good about their capability. I really had no idea what I was doing. It was terribly stressful for me. And I don't stress out very easily, hardly ever. And I found myself on the wrong end of a short. I shorted a stock that it quadrupled in 3 weeks. And I did it with leverage. And I was finding myself waking up at like 2 a.m. wondering what's going on in the Hong Kong exchange. And then at 5, I can start to check the London exchange. And it was just eating me up. And it was a combination of, I'm not doing anything of value. I'm not building anything I'm proud of. And it's just consuming me in a very negative way.
So it taught you what you don't want.
What I don't want. But there was an element of it that I liked. I like fast pace. I kind of enjoy chaos. I actually kind of enjoy this. And I don't know how to describe this feeling, but it's sort of like I'm tipping back in my chair. I don't quite know which way I don't know if I'm going back or forward. And that's like this rush. And I enjoy that to the extent that I feel like it's not a binary moment where I crash down or I survive, but like it's a collection of like these high adrenaline, like really interesting moments. And there's a whole bunch of risk in every single one of them. But in the collection of them, you actually have this opportunity you have this portfolio of risk that might turn out to something because you have a little bit of control over every decision that you make.
I love that. I love that. I love how you brought the stock into what you're doing now. All right. So you start there. It's $1 million, grow it to $300 million. Pretty good return for, if you're looking at ROI.
My dad and brother were pleased with their investment.
Yay. Why not just ride off into the sunset? You'd made enough money.
That is a thought I had. That never serious. My thought wasn't so much, in my late 30s, riding off in the sunset was not interesting to me at all. Like, we still lived in a small house. I paid back the $200,000 that I'd borrowed from my parents with interest. Took me 12 years, 11 years to pay it back. I remember leaving Skullcandy the day I left, feeling this tremendous burden lifted from me. And part of that's because for 8 years, I was always a half a step behind. And it moved fast. And then we went public. And then we were the highest shorted stock on the NASDAQ for 6 months. And so when I finished...
So you're on the other side of that trade.
Oh my, yeah. I was in a pressure cooker constantly. And so if you ask me about my Skullcandy experience, like nothing but really, really like deep gratitude for them. I learned so much from it. I will tell you I loved it till I really think about it. And then I will say I was totally dissatisfied with the outcome. And I didn't feel sufficiently, knowledgeable or good at what I did. We certainly had enough financial resources to be done, but that wasn't what drove me for a long time. Like, I wanted enough to pay off my business school debt, my Subaru, and like just things like that. But money is not my driver, and it becomes less and less so every day. I just don't think about it ever, except the reality that there's only one way to ultimately keep scoring business, and that's money. And it's not my money; it's the money of like everyone in my office. Financial security is important to them. I have 3 private equity partners. I hope they love Traeger, but they really love returns, and that's what keeps them in business. I finished Skullcandy, and I felt this need to sort of pick myself up and look above the headphone space and say, what do I really want to be? Like, do I need to reinvent myself to be happy? Should I be more focused now on helping others, whether it be, as an advisor to entrepreneurs, Should we start a nonprofit? Should we give our money away over the next 30 years? Should we take our family and move to, go join the Peace Corps? I mean, like, I considered all of these things. I had a lot of conversations. Where I eventually netted out was I wasn't done. I loved the thought of doing it better. I wanted to be a better leader. I wanted to feel like that it wasn't just luck the first time. And interesting, I look back and I realized it was just luck the first time. But the second time, I can actually draw on the lessons I learned. And I love that about it. Like, I find myself in the middle of these incredibly difficult situations here, and they don't feel like a burden to me. They feel fun.
Because you're like, we did that in practice. Skullcandy was your warm up.
Big time. And I am so much better now than I was then. And by the way, I'm so much better now than I was 12 months ago. And I remember talking to a career mentor of mine. Like, this guy rescued me when things were just terrible at Skullcandy. Called this guy, just a cold call.
What's his name? Let's give him a shout out.
Wayne Marino.
Okay.
Wayne was the number 2 at Under Armour, worked for Kevin Plank, joined when they were doing $50 million in sales, probably left at about $2 billion in sales. And I called him and I said, a few people have said I should call you. I need a CFO. And he kind of laughed and he said, I'm leaving Under Armour. I'm not looking for a job. I'm moving out west. How can I help you? And literally, he picked up the phone and I said, okay. Started talking about my problems in business. We spent 45 minutes together. And I just said, this guy has an answer to everything. Like, just wise. He's seen these patterns that I hadn't seen. He said, I'm coming out west in a few weeks to check on the house we're renovating. You want me to swing by Salt Lake? I've got to go through there to get to Reno, drive to Tahoe. Anyway, shows up. I think we're having a long lunch and we spend 2 days together. Literally walks in with his bags and stayed in my basement for a couple of nights, which was not very nice. And we just whiteboarded like all of these problems, take pictures, erase. And we did this for 2 straight days. And I bring this up because this guy knows me well. And when I was thinking about not just Traeger, but other things, like, do I reinvent myself? Do I do this again? He had a really astute observation. He said, I think what you really want is to be better at what you don't feel like you're great at.
Better at your craft.
I want to be better at my craft. And
of being a CEO that you'd wanted to be since you were a little boy.
That I wasn't at Skullcandy. Like, I faked it constantly, but I really didn't. Like, I was so deficient in so many things. And I thought it was a good observation on his part. And it really rang true that I needed to get better to feel good about me accomplishing what I'd set out to do. And I think the good news is that I sometimes looked at successful business leaders and I wondered, how do they keep up this energy in their 50s and 60s and 70s? Does it get monotonous? Like, the good news is that for me, because money is not the driver, it's the building and it's the being good at what I do. I have this ability to sort of look back every month, every 6 months, every 12 months and say, I've made progress. I'm better. And I have so far to go. And I would be the first one to acknowledge that. But I really love the fact that, honestly, I look back 6 months and I don't know how I did it 6 months ago. I was so deficient in so many things. To me, that's the best part of this whole thing.
So I want to double click on Wayne for just a minute, because this relationship that you've just described is fairly remarkable. And I think a lot of people say, I want a mentor like that. Will you be my mentor? As Sheryl Sandberg has said in her book, Lean In. I think, though, that to be able to have a really good mentor means you have to be a good mentee. What do you think you did that made it so he's like, okay, I'm going to invest my time in him? Can you think of anything? Has he ever shared that with you, why he was willing to spend that time?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I think part of it was I caught him at a perfect moment in time. Part of it is that he probably felt sorry for me. I mean, like the questions I'm asking probably said, not only, kid, you're lost,
And your
but
company's growing fast. You need help.
but I've been through this. I think there was like a connection over his ability to help. And then I think that I was very thoughtful in my request. And some of these things I understand better looking back. I didn't have a mentor. I was just making this up as I went. And boy, I didn't realize what I was missing out on. I can't tell you how many people reach out to me now via LinkedIn from a conference. And it's like, will you be my mentor? I'm like, hold on a second. What do you do? You're building a medical data. No, I don't know anything about it. You've got this whole range of like incredibly thoughtful, good fit. I got a LinkedIn message a couple of days ago, which is, hey, I have a startup. Can you help me with best practices on scaling a business? I used to respond to all of these. And the reality is, I don't know where to start. It took away time from
Scaling your business.
Scaling my business for my family. And so I don't know that Wayne has really worked with anyone else the way that he has with me. And it was a really good fit. And I really appreciate him. Like, this guy really rescued me. It's a little interesting looking back. Like, it was total luck. He picked up the phone and he came out to visit me. He's actually he's on my board now here, and sleeps in my basement still. It's a better basement, different house. But this is still the guy. He either has an answer for everything, and he asks 100 questions. They share some thoughts, and I get off the phone and I say, "Oh my gosh, like, it's so obvious now." It made me want to be a mentor, and there was a time where I did way too much of it. Like, I picked up the phone every time because I sort of said, number one, I owe it to these people. Wayne did it for me, and he was so helpful. And I sort of felt like I needed to do the same until I just felt overwhelmed by it.
So what do you do now in order to, kind of help people do enough work that they've earned the right to be mentored?
First of all, a really thoughtful request.
Specific.
I will think about.
Yeah.
I will typically set up a brief phone call. And part of it's like a thoughtful request. Part of it's like my ability to be helpful. Part of it's, I enjoy the energy of mentoring entrepreneurs who have way more energy than I do, right? I mean, like, who are actually going through this thing for the first time. Part of it is that I want to find good fit with the people that I spend time with. It's been more meaningful in fewer moments.
Right. You're now the CEO of Traeger Grills. Tell us how you landed here.
In the year that I was thinking about other things between Skullcandy and what turned out to be Traeger, but I looked at a lot of different businesses. And that was fun for me to sort of just think about industry, startup, growth phase. Traeger was I think the confluence of a couple of things. One, I was like 9 or 10 months into taking time off. It was the best 9 or 10 months of my life with my family. Like the ability to think and process and write and learn and read and travel. But I was ready to do something again. So the timing was right. I look back at Skullcandy. I had this appreciation for the sort of the magic pixie dust that was sprinkled on top that I didn't control. And I wanted to find something that I thought was really special, because I think that's ultimately, like, how do you really ultimately disrupt and create product market fit? It's not through great execution. You have to do that too. But I know a lot of really well-run businesses that just aren't moving the needle in what they do. And so it was important for me to find an opportunity that I felt like I could build something, like, meaningfully disrupt an industry. It's actually the reason I passed on Traeger the first time. Like, the first time I looked at it, I said, from lifestyle, board sports, Skullcandy, audio, media, to the grilling industry. My perception of the industry was boring, commoditized, bent steel. I didn't like the channels of distribution at the time, hardware stores, appliance stores. I didn't spend time there. I didn't know them. I didn't find them very interesting. So I turned it down. I was just committed to finding something that I was really passionate about. And this is part of the problem when you have a great experience in your career. And it was a hard experience at Skullcandy. It was a great experience. Your filter just becomes narrower and narrower. And so the first time I saw it, I said, I don't think so. I just need to keep looking. The second time, I had a very different perspective, which was I actually did a little bit of due diligence on the business. And I looked at the industry and I said, first of all, what industries do you want to disrupt? Big, boring, slow moving, non innovating. Like, I'm not going to go disrupt high tech. There are plenty of people that are doing that beautifully and not making money in the process. I want to disrupt something. And, I hate to say it, maybe I wanted to be the tallest of the little people, but I looked at the space and
But that's what you do when you're disrupting.
Yes. And it's changed a lot. I mean, it's become like much more competitive. But at the time I looked and I said, maybe this is what's beautiful about this. Everyone likes to cook. Everyone likes to grill. The customer experience hasn't changed since gas grills came on the scenes in the 70s. Literally, nothing has changed whatsoever. And I said, strange that would be the case. Why is that the case? And then I got to know Traeger. And what I realized, it had a meaningful point of difference from a product perspective. And that's not always good. Like, there are products that are different, but not in a way that's positive to consumers. They're just different for the sake of being different. What I found when I talked to literally 6 Traeger owners and randomly selected, went up to Oregon to talk to people, 6 out of 6 said it's the best product they've ever owned. First person said, my Traeger changed my life. And I looked up from my notes and I said, say that again? What are you talking about? It's like your backyard grill. And what I realized was that, something that was so meaningful to so few people, just for whatever reason, hadn't made its way outside of Oregon. And I said, what if we actually build the product solution was really cool. The product was like, the quality of the experience was like a 2 out of 10. But the solution, like the platform of the solution, I thought was really interesting. I was just fascinated by this big space that no one cared about, and this little Traeger brand that had 27 years of history, but really was a secret kept in the Pacific Northwest. And fortunately, I went back to it because it is a special business. It really is.
What year was this?
This was in 2013.
All right. So just tell us a little bit of the story of what it looked like when you got there and, sales, kind of culture, just kind of give us a picture. And then it's so fun reading what you've said about the business because there's so much excitement. Like, I can just feel it. So I want you to kind of share that with people.
I'd spent more time in sort of my own ventures or startups. I didn't really have an appreciation for the fact that I had owned and built culture, and in a sort of almost a second generation business that had evolved over time, and with ownership changes and with people. And so I didn't really think to ask any questions about that. I just looked at this business and said, this is an amazing space. And operationally, this business just feels so broken. I can fix this business and build something. And then I was 24 hours on the inside and I said, ooh, this place doesn't feel good. It was about a $70 million business, modestly profitable, like just really operationally, just really broken. But what I didn't realize was that being broken operationally was really more of a symptom of just being dysfunctional from a leadership and a cultural perspective. And there was a very rude awakening. And unfortunately, I didn't get it until I'd already hired 4 of my good friends from Skullcandy. They had left good jobs and they got on the inside of this thing. And I said, guys, we have this is tough. We have a problem. And the biggest problem was that the majority owner, my partner, let's just say he and I saw the world very differently. Like I was fascinated by this guy, probably in his mid 60s at the time, very successful entrepreneur, very abrasive in our meetings, but it didn't bother me. I was fascinated by how much he'd done across so many different business categories, business spaces, from banking to Hollywood to lawn care to grills. I mean, like I was fascinated by it. I said, I can learn from this guy. And this guy's going to be an interesting partner. 30 days into it, it was just this very, a sort of aggressive, abusive relationship. Every time the phone rang, my stomach sank. It's like, here he is again. And every conversation was hard. And boy, 30 days into it, like in Traeger years in those days, that felt like years. And I didn't need the money. I didn't need a job. I was doing this again because I wanted to be better, but it was hard for me to be better when I felt anxiety because of my majority partner. I stepped back and I looked at the business and I said, how's this doing 70, $80 million of revenue and like so dysfunctional cultural and from a leadership and an operational perspective? So I loved the bones of the business more and more each month. And I struggled more and more with just how I felt when I went to the office. I went to my first board meeting in New York in my private equity partner's office. I presented a 100-page PowerPoint deck that, interestingly, I was committed to being incredibly honest about what I saw in the business, about the people, the culture, the strategic deficit, the channel concentration, product liability, China sourcing issues, IP issues. It's like I was 5 months into this thing and part of me said, I love this. Like, I love what's here. And the other part said, this is a ticking time bomb. I remember going in this meeting and, the majority owner wasn't there yet. And we all sat very uncomfortably waiting for him. And I sat at the head of the table, which is typically where I like to sit just to present so I can see all eyes. And I was asked if I would move and leave that space open for this guy. And by the way, my private equity partner, they were amazing. They were just overly accommodating to a tough situation. They're still on my board and they're awesome, like the best partnership. I moved.
Do you want to give them a shout out?
Trilantic Capital Partners.
Okay.
Best. Like, honestly, I would do business with them 1,000 times over. The seat at the end of the table was open. The majority owner walked in and chose not to sit in that seat because it was next to me. He was clearly angry because he had read the deck and he sat in a seat 2 over from me with someone in between us. And so for 4 hours, I presented 98 slides. This guy didn't say a word. And you could see steam coming out of his eyes and his ears. And I was there to be fully transparent and to bring this thing to a head. One of us was going to leave. And I didn't care if it was me. At this point, I didn't care if it was me or him. I wrote a very meaningful check for the business. And he said, you know what? I don't care. If I get it back, I get it back. And we got to the end and this guy just started pounding his fist on the table. And he said, I disagree with every blankety word on every blankety slide. And he's like spitting across the table in this conversation just because he's angry. It was really awkward. And we sort of wrapped up in like 10 minutes, 4 hours, and like 10 minutes is like, wasn't much left to say. And at this point, like, I'm done. I don't expect to see this guy ever again. Everyone started walking out. I put my backpack on my shoulders and he says, Jeremy, can you stay and talk? I'm like, no. I so don't want to. And I felt good about just delivering the news. I didn't pull any punches. This wasn't going to work out. And we sat next to each other on the same side of the table. We turned to each other. I scoot back a little bit because it's a little too close for comfort. He scoots forward a little bit. Our knees are bumping, and proceeded to have a really odd conversation, which was, he starts yelling at me. You're the only CEO who hasn't been deferential to the owner, on and on and on. And I said, look, all due respect, I don't view my role as being deferential. I came in here to give you my thoughts on the business.
And I wrote a check, so I'm also an owner.
And I wrote so I'm an owner. I may be a minority owner. And then it quickly transitioned to, I've been doing a lot of research on you and your family. I can't tell you how much I admire you. Your great-great-great-grandfather crossed the plains with Brigham Young, and he's like, he knows a lot about me and my family and my
your pedigree.
But at this point, he's being really soft and kind. And I've never seen him again. 45 days later, my private equity partner, I own the business. It's a great partnership, and we control the destiny. Like, we can build this thing. All we need to do now is build a plan and be thoughtful and reasonable and smart.
Okay, you went from, we had this conversation where he was in my face, incredibly
literally
in your face, to soft spoken, I admire you. Who made that, we want to buy you out? Did he offer?
No, he did not. But I called my private equity partner and I said, hey, listen, life's too short. I'd love to do another deal with you down the road. I'm not leaving tomorrow, but we're either buying this thing or let me help you find another CEO. And so we started conversation with the majority owner, and literally the deal was closed 6 weeks later. And there was nothing in that deck that wasn't 100% honest. And as much as he didn't believe a single word on the 100 pages, I actually think he believed it. He was running this business from South Florida over a phone, based in Portland and Springville, Utah, with an office in China that turns out had some not so savory things going on. And I think he looked at his deck and he didn't acknowledge it. But he said, whoa, this is pretty thoughtful and this could be right.
So probably angry and embarrassed and frustrated, and he just didn't even know. And yet he respected you immensely.
He was angry with me because I didn't respect him the way that all of his other CEOs had. And I wasn't disrespectful. At that point, I just didn't care what he thought. And I've actually gone back and looked at our email exchanges early on, where he's just like ripping me to shreds over email. And my responses were measured. They were respectful. They had positive tone. I couldn't do it again, by the way. I really did try my hardest to make it work. And I haven't seen him since. We got a deal done. It was a risky deal to put another dollar in the business, but we were either going to fail out of the gate, or we were going to continue to invest and we're going to fix it. And we kind of looked at each other and said, do we believe in this business? Yeah, as much as we did day one. Can we fix these issues? Well, it's the two of us now. And we did. And we did it together. I actually believe that I'm going to reach out to him one day and take him to dinner. And by the way, I actually think he genuinely liked me. I mean, we spent a lot of hours together just talking about the business before we started. And the partnership got off on the wrong foot quickly, and it just didn't let up. And we were just stylistically so different. But I would love to go back to him, take him to dinner. Number one, say thank you. This was so far the best moment of my career. You were right. Thank you. This thing was in much worse shape when you bought it. What did you see? You've done all of these interesting random things. Tell me more about, I'm actually interested in this guy. And you know what? It was bad partnership. And I'm glad we worked it out. I'd love to go back to him and just thank him for the opportunity.
Yeah. So I would like to dare you or challenge you to do that in the very near future.
Ooh.
You and I both have a mutual friend, Clayton Christensen,
Uh-huh.
who just passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are probably things that we wish we would have said to say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're grateful. I know I do. And I suspect you do as well. And so this gentleman that you're referring to, you said he was in his 60s. I would encourage you to have the dinner sooner than later. Would you consider that?
Let me take a deep breath. Yes, I will reach out. And I don't know if he'll respond to me or not.
It doesn't matter.
But I know how to find him. And I'll let him know why I want to sit down with him.
Good job.
The thought of it is a mix between excitement and intrigue and anxiety, like PTSD.
Everything you like.
The worst 5.5 months of my career by far.
It'll be good though. We talk about the S curve of learning in our work, and we spend a lot of time with people talking about what does it feel like to be at the launch point of the S curve? And what does it feel like to be at the high end of the S curve when you're about to jump and it's time to do something new? But we don't spend a lot of time talking about what it's like to be in the sweet spot of the S curve. And I would argue that's where you are right now. When you took the business over, it was 70 million in revenue. Where is it today? Roughly
$500 million.
$500 million. And you've gone on record saying you want to get to $1 billion.
Yep.
So you could argue you're in the sweet spot. So what are some exciting things, some challenges, some things that are sort of unique to being in this hyper growth, everything's working sort of phase?
So, everything's working.
Is that an overstatement?
Right now, yes. Not an overstatement now. It feels really good right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is everything working? No, we have 1,000 problems. When I hire leaders, I say, hey, I just want to set your expectation for all of the things that we should be doing better at this size. It's not a matter of everything working. It's this great confidence that although we have all of this risk in front of us, we're resourcing our business the right way. We have a strategy. It's going to change, but we have an unbelievable platform of people that I think is going to allow us to get to the right place. So we're investing deeply. I feel so much confidence that we're going to win. I don't doubt it at all. Like, not at all. I had a particularly busy week a few weeks ago, and I think I crossed paths with my wife for the first time awake at like 10 o'clock at night. I'd left early, had a business dinner. She'd put the 6 kids to bed. And like 10 o'clock, I see her in the closet as we're sort of taking my shoes off, getting ready for bed. And she said, how's your day? And I said, and she's quiet. I said, you know what? I love every single day of this. And then it was quiet. And she got kind of nervous, which is okay. Like, because we had a different conversation. I remember walking the streets of Boston at my 10th business school reunion where I said, I got to leave Skullcandy. And she said, what? Like, everything this is so important to you. And so I think she was waiting for that next. And I said, no, like there's nothing else. Like, today was crazy and chaotic and parts were hard, but it was awesome. I loved it. And the combination of these two things, we're swinging big and I have confidence where we're going. And I actually really love the problems we're solving. That to me is the sweet spot. And I say that because there are things that we should do so much better, and we'll figure it out. And we're moving that direction. Traeger's been interesting in that the early years were tough, and I didn't know how this thing was going to turn out. I thought there was something here. And then we hit the sweet spot, and we could do no wrong. And then a year came along where I felt like we could do no right. Like 2018 came along, and we have China tariffs, we have steel going up, we have low-cost competition that's knocking us off in a very offensive way. We grew a little, not a lot. Profitability went backwards. We've got debt on the business. And I remember getting 4 or 5 months into the year and saying, we have to reinvent ourselves. Like literally 6 months ago, we could do no wrong, and we're still a good business. But for me, the measuring stick isn't, can we grow a little bit here and there and sort of make money? It was, can we really win? And in 2018, we weren't really winning. And it was the first moment in my career where there were sort of two thoughts that I had on an ongoing basis that were important to me. One was, if we just continue, what I did at Skullcandy is optimize. And it wasn't winning for me. Like it's a great startup story, but we didn't win in the end. Beats one. And so I said, in the moment where we're feeling the most pain, the easiest thing to do would be to optimize, and we need to do just the opposite. We need to swing bigger at product experience and brand. That's hard to do when, you've got leverage and interest payments and you're not growing profitability. You just did a deal 10 months ago. The second piece of it was, I didn't fear it. I was so intrigued by what we were trying to solve. And there was all sorts of risk. Like 2019, we started to harvest some of the investments that we've been working on for a while, but we really doubled down. We took a really big risk on launching this connected product at much lower price point, hit to gross margin, more complicated from a tech perspective. But we really believed we needed to take a risk based on all of the consumer work that we had done, and it worked. And what was interesting about that is Skullcandy, we went from white hot to like painfully, how do we eke out growth and profitability? And I didn't know how to reset. And in 2018, we reset, and it was methodical. And my strategy is not perfect every time. Worked out perfectly for us.
But now you know how to reset.
I know how to reset, and I don't fear it. The confidence I feel from that, is more important than any lesson that I've learned from a strategy perspective. When I feared I was a deer in the headlight, there was no there's no resourcefulness. There was no innovation, because fear and innovation are not highly connected feelings. It's like, how do I do this a little bit safer? And then we got to win. The reinvention had just started, because I'm looking at the market saying, okay, this was the answer. We've created a moat around product experience. There's complexity to it, but the consumer sees it as simple, not complicated. Let's double down on this. And so we now look 3, 4, 5 years out, and what we're thinking about doesn't look anything like what we're doing today. Had I not reset in 18, we would be not only in an optimization mode, we'd be in hyper optimization mode. And so now, our growth, it's the first time I've been in a business where growth accelerated after a number of years of growth and then slowing. And this is where I have confidence in the future. Then I started rebuilding the team. We had a lot of work to do. We had a lot of gaps on our team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting this sense for what good looks like from a people perspective. And I didn't know that this many years in my career, I loved risk and swinging big around a business problem, but I was very risk averse around people. And I realized that, the outcome is connected to your people, and you can't take risk on the model and the product and not being willing to continually take risk on the people. And it's better people. It's making some changes, although not every pattern is the same in business. There are a lot of similarities and patterns, but if nothing else in problem solving, the approach is, I think, consistent. But these two things around reset and swing big, and make sure that you have a team that's high quality and as good as the size of your vision, these things to me are repeatable.
Yeah. You disrupt yourself and you build an A team.
Well said.
Thank you.
That's not the first time you said that, is it?
No, definitely. I mean, yes, it's the first time. Okay, final 2 questions. For those who are listening who are intrigued and want to buy a Traeger grill, what's a good starter grill for people?
Well, yeah, it's the Ironwood. You got to buy the Ironwood.
Iron weights.
It's middle of the range in terms of price point. In my opinion, it's the highest value. I cook on it. I love it.
Okay.
And it will make people really masters of the craft of cooking at home,
Okay.
which is fun.
Any final advice or final words that you'd like to share?
I want to go back to a couple of things that we talked about, and I think this encapsulates really sort of the evolution that I've gone through in my career, and part of what makes it satisfying. So you've heard me talk mostly about the business, the problem, the solving, the strategy, and I love all of that stuff. I never want to get a job again. Stuff is so fun. The piece that's become meaningful to me is doing it alongside other people and ensuring that I'm not the only guy having a great experience. As a CEO, I got so wrapped up in, I got to pay off my business school debt. I have to be successful. I have to be a CEO. That's what I decided to do. And there are a lot of moments I didn't enjoy because I was so driven by the outcome. Like for me, there is an outcome, but it's a daily build. And it's like enjoying this moment with these people every day is so important to me. And it's making sure that they are enjoying it the same way that I am. And that for me has been game changing. That to me was just, as opposed to aligning interests of people to create a business outcome, doing the right thing for people and caring about their whatever it is. And actually, you mentioned Clayton Christensen. And I don't want to go there because I get a little bit tearful. It's so recent, someone I admired so much. But when I was thinking about reinventing myself, I read his book, How We Measure Your Life. I remember seeing him speak at Harvard Business School. I didn't know him well at Harvard. I came to know him afterward. And walking into Burden Auditorium, hearing him speak not long after having had a stroke, and with his cane to 1,000 people in the auditorium, 500 overflow. And it's the first time I'd heard him talk about this. And I'm looking around me at all of these like super type A, very driven people. And you see this in increments of 5 years. People change. They have success, they fail, they get divorced, they have kids. And these are very driven people. They're all good people, but over-index in terms of the importance of career in their lives. And I'm sitting there like soaking in what he's saying and hearing it for the first time and looking around and saying, I wonder what these people think of this. So I went and I bought his book, and I'm thinking about what's important to me, what's next. And there's a line where he said something like, management's a noble profession. And it's noble not because you create jobs and pay payroll. It's noble because you have this far-reaching impact on people. And it's not just people in the workplace. It's when people show up and they are their best selves, because it's not an abusive environment. It's an inviting environment. It's like you're there to win, but not at all costs. You're there to create an experience and help people stretch themselves and grow and be remarkable. And then they go home, and they may not be at home talking about grills incessantly the way that I do, but they go home with a good attitude, feeling good about themselves. They're better at whatever they do and wherever they interact. And that to me was sort of the answer of, do I need to go carry water up a hill in Guatemala to do good? And I said, the intersection of my passion and the ability to do good is this. It's building a business. So it took me a long time to really understand that. And it's only been the last couple of years where I've said, this is it. I get to love it every day, love what I do. But part of the reason I love it is because I'm helping create an experience for other people. They've got to work every day, too many hours a week. We might as well love what we do and become better at the same time.
Jeremy Andrus, thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
I really loved this interview for a number of reasons. First, because I haven't interviewed a guest in person for several years because, logistics. It was delightful to speak face to face. There's a photo in the show notes if you're interested. Second, as we've been developing new products and offerings for WLJ, several of our team members pointed out that we don't really have a lot of interviews with people who are in the sweet spot on their S-curve of learning. One of the things I love about coaching clients in the sweet spot is that there's a lot of possibility and room to grow and learn, which is what we're all wired for. It's fun. You can hear that in Jeremy's voice when he was talking about how exciting it is to get better at what he's doing every 6 months. That's what the sweet spot can feel like. When things are humming, it's hard, but not too hard. It's easy, but not too easy. You may not love every single day, but you are more likely to come home feeling fulfilled every day. You also, and I want you to really pay attention to this, you're also in a place where it's easier to reinvent, to disrupt yourself. At Skullcandy, Jeremy said that when they were in pain, he optimized. At Traeger, because he's been to this School of Skullcandy experience, when things slowed down in 2018, because there are curves within curves, he didn't say, let's optimize. He said, let's take a step back. They invested in this connected product, which has turned out to be a slingshot. There's another layer as well. If you can be in the sweet spot of a learning curve you really have thought about, you've searched for, and it feels like it's connected to your deeper why, which, by the way, wasn't that a lovely, lovely tribute to Clayton Christensen? When you're connected to your why, there's a bigger meaning and purpose to what you're learning and accomplishing, and then things are really sweet. Thank you again to Jeremy Andrus for being our guest. P.S. We did buy the Ironwood Grill. Thank you to Josh Anderson for recording our interview with Jeremy in person at Traeger headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah. Thank you to sound engineer Whitney Joe, manager, editor Macy Robison, content contributors Emily Davis and Nancy Wilson, and art director Brandon Jameson. I'm Whitney Johnson, and this is Disrupt Yourself.